Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falasz, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining me again this week because I've got a returning guest behind the mic today, and our audience was really excited to hear from her last summer. So we've invited Sara Stock, founder of Stock Legal, back to the show. As you probably recall, Sara and her team help doctors with things like partnerships, the group practice space, and all of the legal structures that are so critical to their foundation and their operation, among other areas of focus, of course. And last time, Sara walked us through some of the most common questions and issues that she encounters and her team encounters, and they solve for these dentist owners. And we called it Demystifying Dental because she provides the clarity that is absolutely necessary when it comes to building and protecting your business. So if you missed it, make sure and go back to the August 21st episode and give that a listen, or you can watch it on YouTube if you prefer. And because we respect Sara's guidance and her expertise so much, we've asked her to come and speak at our Multisite Mastery event that we're co-hosting with Midmark in March, where we'll help owners really fine-tune their business plans to build, expand, and to do that in a really streamlined and efficient and reproducible way, while avoiding a lot of the pitfalls, of course, and while always keeping your end goals in mind. So appropriately, Sara's session is titled The Legal Life Cycle of a Dental Practice Explained Through a Choose Your Own Adventure Paradigm, which I love. Because your business really is your own adventure and you get to
It is.
decide. You all get to decide how that legacy plays out. Again, always starting with the end in mind and with deliberate prescriptive planning. So let's get into it and allow me to reintroduce Sara Stock, founder of Stock Legal. Sara, welcome back to the show.
Jamie, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely adore being on this with you. So grateful for the opportunity, not only to speak at this conference, but to get to spend a little bit of time with you and your audience and share a little bit about this really fun topic.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you. And we're all looking forward to that event in March.
Yeah.
So with that, why don't we rewind a little bit for those that
Yeah.
the August 21st episode? Why don't we go back and just fill our listeners in a little bit about you and Stock Legal and how that came to be? Because I don't want to miss anybody if they background.
Oh, well, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, my quick background is that I was an equity partner at a large regional law firm. I was there for 12 years. I had an amazing career, made the gut-wrenching decision to leave and start my own practice almost 12 years ago, which is wild to think about. It was then me and about 100 clients. Today, Stock Legal is 16 lawyers, several thousand clients. We sign between 30 and 60 new engagement letters every month.
Wow.
And we've come up with, I think, this really important niche in the market. And it is generally that small to mid sized businesses need sophisticated legal counsel at a price that they can afford. And as I was working at the large regional law firm and then building my own practice, we built out this really great niche in dental. Started working with DeWalker back in 2017. Have loved every minute of our, 8, almost 9 years partnering together, helping dentists. Dentists are fantastic entrepreneurs. They're so excited. They're open to creative ways to grow and scale their business. And that gets me really excited. That gets my team really excited. And we, in working with dentists, have helped start de novos. We often build out incentive equity programs for our dental clients, group practice structures, dental service organization structures. And we've got a really robust buy and sell side M&A team at Stock Legal. So it's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I know that our clients rave about you and your team, and so does
Thank
DeWalker.
you.
Frankly, so do I. So
Thank you.
excited to have you back. And, your team just covers all of this from end to end.
Yeah.
So That's really a great value, and like you said, at a price they can afford, because sometimes I think that's the scary part, is getting started
It
and the cost involved in that as well.
It is. And, with that experience, much to your point earlier, it really is a choose your own adventure as an entrepreneur. There's clients will come to us and they'll say, okay, tell me how to do this. And I'll say, well, what are your goals? Tell me about what your exit looks like, because there is no black and white, right? Everything is gray. We can build the legal structure in whatever way works best for you. And so for this conference and trying to think about how do you make legal interesting and sexy and, get people excited about it, I thought, well, let's try choose your own adventure, because really that's what it is. When a client sits down with us and they want to have a conversation about how to scale their business, it's a decision tree in my mind based on what their needs are, what their desires are, what vision are they casting. And so it'll be really fun to talk about this in March.
I agree, and you said it just playing out that adventure and choosing what you want to do, and
Yeah,
like we always preach, starting with the end in mind, and I know that
that's
you
it.
as well, you have to know what you want. You have to sit down and ask yourself, "What am I trying to build?" And, obviously, that can change over time, but starting out knowing what you want, at least generally speaking, and then laying out a playbook, a business plan to get there,
Yes.
and foundationally putting the legal structure in place.
Yeah, and, I find one of the and I know, like, we're going all over the place right now, but just
It's
share.
okay.
I I find one of the gating items in scaling a business is that so many entrepreneurs, so many dentists, they just don't know what the options are, right? We'll sit down and talk about incentive equity. I mean, I had a really great conversation with a potential client this week, and, they're making a transition from their existing counsel to stock legal. And that counsel is amending and restating an operating agreement for their LLC, right? Basic blocking and tackling when you're, building something new or iterating on what you're doing. Um, I said to them, talk to your counsel about building out a class of incentive equity. If you're an LLC taxed as a partnership and you're amending and restating your operating agreement, just go ahead and build out that class of incentive equity, call it profits interest, and then you'll have it. And they were like, "Oh, wait, what's incentive equity? How could we use that?" Right? I mean, you just don't know. Yes, you just don't know. And so, helping to educate on what your options are. I mean, that will all be a part of this choosing your own adventure, so that, people leave that conference really at least being able to wrap their arms around, I may not know my path, I may not know where I'm going, but I at least know what my options are on my way there.
Absolutely, and that's one of the ways that Polaris, loves working with you, is that
Mm.
we can explore those options together and really set it up
Yeah.
from the beginning the right way,
Oh, yeah.
and get those pieces in place. But like you said, we were meandering with that, but on some important points, we had to
Yes.
cover it.
Yes. Yes, of course.
Yes. So let's talk about the March 25th through 27th Multisite Mastery event at Midmark. I want to specifically talk about your session and what that's going to look like, and some questions we can answer for listeners who are going to be
Yeah.
attending with us. Um, One of the first things that came to mind in looking at the description of your course, and I don't want to give it all away yet, but the choice to grow a practice, to add a de novo, add an acquisition comes with some challenges. What do you see are the top three challenges that owners run into?
Yeah. I mean, when you're growing a practice as a business owner, the first thing that comes to mind for me is financial stability, legal stability, partnership issues, all of those basic blocking and tackling that, have to be incredibly solid before you start to scale, right? And so, from a financial stability perspective, having a great relationship with a bank is incredibly important. Access to capital before you need it is incredibly important. And of course, it feels like I'm tooting my own horn, but really that legal structure to address those partnership issues, because as you scale, as the business grows, as the practice grows, the more money that it makes, the more people get emotional and emotionally involved. And so having that legal structure around the partnership in place as a foundational piece is key. Otherwise, you end up as you're scaling in distraction because the partners are fighting amongst each other. Potential litigation comes out of partnership issues all the time. And so set the rules of the game, get them really clear, have all of your buy sell provisions figured out, be really clear on obligations of each party. All of that is my number one challenge that I see as we're scaling and growing.
Well, and there's a in my mind,
Mm.
with a little bit of Leo background that I have, what I saw in working with the clients of the attorneys in the firm where I was there's a comfort that comes from clarity.
Yeah.
People know what to expect and you have this
Yes.
structured the right way. There's a comfort from that because then they can move forward in not a let's put out fires mode and, deal with things in a reactive way. They can actually stick to that plan. They can stick to that
Yes.
business plan, move forward more efficiently and more
Mhm.
quickly if they choose to do so. And it just makes all the difference in the world.
It does. It does. And, it all rolls back to the vision cast by the owner, right? What are we building? And so, to your point earlier, being really clear on what you're building is so important as you're trying to scale. And look, everyone iterates, right? We have to pivot, we have to iterate, we have to be flexible. Uh, but you have to start with a plan. So,
Yes, and that, like I said before, that plan can get changed, it can be modified, but there are still some elemental pieces that don't change to start out with.
yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of building a group practice, which is kind of the
Mhm.
focus of this whole event and
Yeah.
choosing that adventure that you want, not everybody should build a group practice.
No.
Definitely not for the faint of heart. But
Yeah.
how do I know whether or not I should if I'm a dentist owner? Like, what do I need to be thinking about there?
Yeah, well, I would start introspectively. And I know the lawyer is going to talk about being introspective, but it is incredibly important because in order to build a group practice, you have to have the capacity and the desire, right? Capacity and desire to me go hand in hand. If you love to be chairside and you're hands on and you love to practice, you're not going to have the capacity and you sounds like you don't have the desire to be in the business, right? You have to be working on the business constantly. And so, really sitting down and thinking about, am I business minded? Is do I want to be away from the chair? Do I want to be thinking about building the business and not just being a dentist, right? And, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you think you're business minded, you get into it and you're like, oh, this is
It's not for me.
terrible. This is not for me. So there is a little bit of trial and error there. But if you can start by being introspective, I think that's incredibly important. And then, the other one that really comes up for me is people management, right? I mean, as you're building a group practice, you've got to think about hiring, you've got to think about retention, you've got to think about managing people. And there are, of course, some legal tools that and legal framework that comes into that. But, from a should you build a group practice perspective, I mean, at first, I think you have to decide do you want to manage people? People are hard, right?
Yeah,
People are
I know
hard.
that there'd be a resounding absolutely not come from that.
Yeah.
There are some that'll love it, right? So
Yeah.
it really and doctors also struggle with the decision to leave the chair or transition
Yeah.
the chair into that CEO role, and some wanna keep their hand in it a little bit. It's hard to not go 100% in when you're a CEO, and I think that full transition has to take place if your plan is laid out in a certain way, but it's very doable to start with.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, I'll say that some of our most successful clients have, as they're building out a group practice or DSO structure, have gone back and gotten their MBAs.
Yeah.
And that to me just makes incredible sense, right? If you're transitioning out of the practice of dentistry into a CEO role, go take some classes, go get some education, really build a skill set around that. So
Yeah, this might not be one of those learn on the fly type of situation.
it's fair. It's totally fair.
Yeah. Well, and going back to your comment on being introspective, we see some owners that they just keep wanting to add locations one after the next, but they're really not taking those foundational steps to decide what it is they really want, at least to know
Yeah.
that in one bucket, and then to really lay out those locations in an operationally sound way.
Yeah.
So I think there are a couple parts of that introspection where, A, do I want to manage people? Do I want to be out of the chair? What do I want to get out of this? Is it a legacy
Yeah.
business I'm going to, pass on to one of my children? Or is it something that I'm building to sell?
Yeah, and that's the knowing the end in the beginning, right? And as part of the choose your own adventure, when a client comes in and says, "I'm building a legacy practice that my kids are going to go to dental school," we build a legal structure one way for that, as compared to I'm building something over 10 years. I want it as big as possible, and then I'm going to exit. The legal structure looks very different. Now, again, you can pivot in between, and there are ways to do that, but when you start out with the end in mind and having a clear idea of what your end is, it really just, casts the vision, builds the path.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thinking of the title of your course, like choose your own adventure,
Yeah.
I'm going to choose my adventure and I'm going to build a group practice. What's the best way to do that? Or is there even one? Because in my mind, there have to be 100 different ways to do this.
I mean, at least 100, if not 1,000, right? And it's so wonderful to have, I mean, hundreds of dental clients, right? You get to see the way that people are skinning the cat differently. So there really is no one way. There are a lot of really basic foundational issues, and I'll harp on that operating agreement again,
Absolutely.
right?
You.
So when you're creating an entity, that operating agreement is your playbook, and it sets all of the rights, obligations, voting rights, distribution rules. All of those are incredibly important. When you're working with an attorney and that attorney is building out the operating agreement, and he or she says it's going to be five, six, seven, $8,000 for this operating agreement, and it's going to be 60, 70 pages long. The reason for that is that it is the foundation. I mean, it is solidly the foundation. I say all the time, it is the second most important agreement you'll ever sign as a business owner. The first being the asset purchase agreement or stock purchase agreement by which you divest of your business. And so invest the time, read it, sit down and talk with your partners about it. Tell your attorney what your vision is for how you want to interact as owners, because that piece is it's critical. And then everything can bloom from there. I mean, you can end up owning the land that the practice is operating on through a real estate holding company and lease it back to the practice. That's one way to iterate on it. You can have some sort of a services agreement that allows you to share resources amongst the group practices. You can build out something more akin to a DSO structure that literally puts all of the non-clinical assets into the dental service organization. There are a thousand variations of all of those pieces and parts. You can grow by acquisition, you can grow by opening de novos, but it all rests on the rules that are in your operating agreement, or if you're a corporation, your shareholders agreement and your bylaws.
Yeah, we cannot stress that enough. Your operating agreement, in my mind, answers every question that you're going to come across. So when those questions do arise, because they will,
Yes,
you go right to that 60, 70 page operating agreement, and there it is. It's all laid
that's
out
right.
for you. There's no fuzziness to anything that you might
Yeah,
question in your mind. And that level of clarity is worth every nickel when it
that's
comes to setting up your business.
yeah, and
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the cost benefit analysis here is really pay the money up front, save the hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees for the litigation in the future, right?
Exactly.
Like, that's the
Exactly.
cost benefit analysis here.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've got some stories that you could share
So
over
many, Jamie. Oh my gosh, so many stories. So many.
things of that again, that rat's nest we talked about last time.
Yes, of
But
legal issues.
yeah,
Yes.
let's do it the right way the first time.
Yeah.
You mentioned something a second ago about the land. That is a question that we get sometimes
Yeah.
too. Can you answer that for our listeners and for those attending? Do they need to own the land too when they're building a group practice?
Yeah, the answer is maybe,
Mm.
possibly.
Do you want
There,
to?
yeah. Do you want to be a landlord? Do you want to take on the responsibility? Do you want to take on the financial risk of owning the real estate? What are interest rates right now? What kind of terms can you get on a loan for the real estate? There are pros and cons to it. So, when you have excess net cash flow as a practice, you get to decide what you want to do with it. Do you want to distribute it to the owners? Everybody makes more money. They invest it in the stock market or they buy a boat or a vacation home.
Yeah,
That's one way.
right.
Another is to invest in the growth of the practice, right? You can grow your existing practice, you can buy other practices, or you can take that excess net cash flow and buy real estate, buy the real estate on which the practice operates. And then you become the owner of the building and you're responsible for the maintenance and the insurance and the taxes and, a volatile real estate market. We always talk about, if you decide that you want to take that excess net cash flow and buy the real estate, there's a very simple way to protect yourself in that process. You've got to put the real estate into a separate entity. And that separate entity has to have a lease between the real estate holding company and the practice. Everyone has to, separate bank accounts, separate books, separate insurance, the whole nine yards. So, you really just get to decide, what do you value? What are you trying to build? And, what's important to you? And I always say, have a conversation with your financial advisor about this, right? He or she can tell you, yeah, you are appropriately invested in the stock market. Why don't you go ahead and take that excess net cash flow and buy real estate? Or, hey, if you want to retire and you want to, continue to have the same lifestyle post retirement, well, you're about $2.5 million short of your investment in the market right now. So let's get you there first, and then you can think of alternative investments. So talk to your financial advisor about this.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. And again, you touched on this. Some very separate and distinct legal agreements need to be in place.
Yes, yes. Very important.
That's a little bit more involved
Basic blocking
than
and tackling.
exactly, exactly. So, if I'm building my group practice, and I know you're going to touch on this and discuss it in your presentation in March, do I have to add partner doctors, other owners in the business, or should I do it all myself? I feel like I know the answer to this, Sarah.
It depends.
Yeah, exactly. Again, you're choosing your own adventure.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Got it.
That's it. When we have practices that are owned by one doctor, we talk a lot about incentive equity, right? And when we talk about incentive equity, we talk about it from a crawl, walk, run perspective. If you caught our podcast in August, you heard me talk a lot about incentive equity, crawl, walk, run. We do a whole presentation on it. But the short version of the story here is that if you have one owner and you want to stay the sole owner, you can use something like phantom equity to incentivize your associate dentists in a way that makes them feel like owners, get compensated like owners. And we've seen amazingly, I mean, some of our most like financially successful dental clients own 100% of their practice. I mean, it's wild, to see what they've built, and they built it over 30 years and it's incredibly profitable. But it's one practice, right? And so if your dream is to have 35 practices over 5 states, right? And you're going to grow by acquisition, well, you're going to need capital to do that. And maybe you're independently wealthy. or maybe you have the support of a great bank, who knows? But often, one of the primary reasons of bringing in a partner is that you need an infusion of capital, right? Another is you found another like-minded individual that shares your vision, shares your dream. You have, complementary working styles, complementary skill sets. Those are great reasons to bring in partners. You can do more with multiple people. Responsibilities can be assigned amongst the partners. Regions can be assigned amongst the partners. Our best exits have been through group practices that have multiple partners. And so, you just have to decide, what do you want to build? What vision are you casting? And then there is some really great experience that we can draw from at Stock Legal to help guide you into the structure that makes sense for that.
Yeah, really good points. And if you are expanding, adding locations, the one thing you cannot do is reproduce yourself.
Yeah. Well,
Tough.
if only,
Oh my
Jamie.
goodness.
I've been
Yeah.
trying to clone myself for 5 years now.
Yeah.
Not happening.
Are still in the chair and you haven't transitioned out to that CEO role and you
Mhm.
are the super producer, you've got to bring in some other anchor doctors that can do
Yes,
staying at these locations. And that's one of the stumbling blocks that we see to
it
growth
is.
and in growth overall is that these doctors aren't producing at the level that the owner does. And we can help with that, of course, too, through clinical coaching. But it's a stumbling block for docs. So there are ways
Agreed.
to solve that, and partners can certainly help.
Agreed.
Well, Sarah, I'm so excited to see you in March and to hear
Thank
your
you.
full presentation and invite everyone
Me
out
too.
to Midmark's Experience Center. So we're all looking forward to that, and we're just so grateful that you're going to be there and share your expertise and knowledge. And it is exciting information. I don't,
Yeah.
you said it's not sexy or exciting, but I wholeheartedly disagree with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's exciting and sexy, but most people are like, let me get a stiff cup of coffee and
Hang on. Right?
right. So
Exactly. Well,
we'll make it entertaining for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely. We'll have some fun with it. I will link to that event in our show notes so that you can take a look at the landing page, see all of the sessions that we're offering on building out your group and doing that in a very confident way. And then I'm also going to link to Stock Legal in our show notes as well, because we want you to be able to reach
Thank you.
out to Sarah with the questions that you have. So don't hesitate to reach out to her either. And Sarah,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, I do a complimentary 30-minute call or Zoom with anyone who reaches out. So I'd be happy to do that. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this podcast. I'm so excited about the opportunity to speak at the conference. And it's always great hanging out with you, Jamie. Always great.
well, thank you. It's great hanging out with you too. And we even got my dog to bark and join us a little bit at the beginning of the show. So,
Yes, perfect. I love it.
well, as always, if you'd like to schedule some time to learn about any of our Polaris expert advisory services, or maybe there's a topic that we haven't covered that you'd like to hear about, you can send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can reach us by visiting our website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and be sure to leave us a rating on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube, where you can now also find videos of your favorite episodes. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.